When you've done all you can, it seems like you can't make it through. And what do you say when your friends turn away?
It is a new day for America. The people of this nation have spoken, an outpouring of joy and of hope and of a renewed faith in tomorrow. We gather together around this one flame. Above the generations, the lonely prophets rise, while truth flares as the day star within their glowing eyes. And other eyes beholden are kindled from that flame, and dawn becomes the morning when prophets love proclaim. Let's join together in singing our opening hymn. The morning hangs a signal.
Good morning, and welcome to our live long-distance worship at All Souls Church on this beautiful morning. My name is Carrie Reichs, and I am so glad to be here as your worship associate today. For almost 200 years, our congregation has sought to live up to the vision inherent in our name, All Souls. Our mission is to build what Dr. King called the beloved community, a vision of human community where the divisions that separate us in our daily lives come tumbling down, and we recognize that all people are welcome at the table of God's love and human fellowship. As Unitarian Universalists, we are diverse in many ways, but united in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person and every vote, and in the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. We invite you to join us as we seek to create a diverse, justice-seeking, spirit-growing community that is true to the dream of all souls. If we were together today in our uplifting sanctuary, I would now invite you to turn to someone near you in the pew for a handshake or a hug. Instead, I will invite you to behold. Rather than absorbing the light streaming through our sanctuary windows, bask in the light emanating from the faces of your All Souls friends in DC and around the world. Although you'll remain on mute, please exchange smiles and waves and chats as you draw strength from the exquisite gallery of this congregation. And again, welcome to All Souls Church.
Good morning, All Souls. There are several updates and invitations that I'd like to share with you this morning. This coming Wednesday, November 11th, is Veterans Day, when we show our appreciation to those who have served our nation in the military. This Wednesday is also All Souls monthly Vespers at 7:30 p.m. These meditative services are a wonderful opportunity to ground yourself in community and song, and it will be particularly powerful to be together this week. Looking further out, in an ordinary year, Sunday, November 22nd, would be our annual Thanksgiving food drive. Staff and volunteers have agreed that we simply cannot do a large in-person collection event this year. And we're investigating a few options that would be both safe and helpful to our community partners. And we will announce the final plans in the coming week. One thing we do know about that Sunday is that Reverend Kathleen will host a conversation about gratitude with Reverend Galen Gingrich, Senior Minister of All Souls Church of New York City. His book, The Way of Gratitude, A New Spirituality for Today, was published in May of that year. So that will be November 22nd from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. And finally, speaking of both gratitude and spirituality, I'd like to invite you, if you are able, to make an additional financial commitment to All Souls, or to fulfill your pledge if you haven't already done so. This is a challenging time in so many ways, and the economic downturn has left the church with a $96,000 gap in our budget. Your financial support is needed to help All Souls continue ministering to and with you, and to and with our city and our nation. Please give generously if you are able, so that our work may continue. We shift now to pastoral concerns. First, in case anyone was asleep or unconscious for the last 24 hours, allow me to share that Joe Biden is the president-elect of the United States. And as vice president-elect, Kamala Harris will break the long, long overdue barrier to women serving in the executive office. We offer prayers of support and courage to them as they prepare to lead a deeply wounded and deeply divided nation. We will do a special recognition of our Read Project for voting rights later in this service, but for now, let us also offer prayers of gratitude for everyone throughout this country who worked to engage more people in our democracy. Shifting to the more personal concerns in the All Souls community, we offer prayers for T. Vatnik's sister, Jessie, who will have brain surgery on November 10th for epilepsy treatment. We are thinking of T and sending healing thoughts to Jessie as they prepare for this day and for the recovery period. We pray also for Serena Lowe, a leader in many of our church's ministries, and her daughter Isabella, as they recover from concussions and other injuries sustained in a car accident last week. We send them prayers of emotional as well as physical healing. We offer condolences to Kurt Fernstrom on the death of his father on Tuesday after several weeks of struggling with health issues. Kurt is glad his father lived a long life and got to see his grandchildren grow up. We send our love to Kurt, spouse Jennifer Abercrombie, and their children Jasper and Shelby. And finally, Cynthia Durham is now at Maryland Rehab Center as she recovers from colon surgery. She's doing well, but can't have visitors. Family and friends are encouraging her with phone calls. In the silence that follows, we invite you to stay on mute, but please say aloud the names of those you carry on your heart this morning. And please join me in prayer. Our prayer today was written by Mr. Barb Grieve, a courageous activist and tireless Unitarian Universalist leader who recently served as co-moderator of our Unitarian Universalist Association. This work is called The Work of Democracy and takes its inspiration from The Work of Christmas by Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman. When the glee of the progressives is stilled, when the posters and yards are removed, when the lawyers and politicians and pundits are quiet, when the protesters are safely home, the work of democracy begins. To prioritize the vulnerable, to reunite the caged children, to feed the hungry, to house the houseless, to release the prisoner, to decriminalize poverty, to provide healthcare for all, to educate the masses, to care for the earth, to protect the vote, to let life flourish. Amen. We have two readings this morning, one from an ancient source, one from a modern source. The ancient source is from the book of Amos, chapter 5, verses 21 to 24, from a translation called The Message. I can't stand your religious meetings. I'm fed up with your conferences and conventions. I want nothing to do with your religion projects, your pretentious slogans and goals. I'm sick of your fundraising schemes, your public relations and image making. I've had all I can take of your noisy ego music. When was the last time you sang to me? Do you know what I want? I want justice, oceans of it. I want fairness, rivers of it. That's what I want. That's all I want. The second reading is from Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. It's Cast with an E on the end. In 2016, the world's oldest and most powerful democracy was in spasms over an election that would transfix the Western world and become a psychic break in American history, one that will likely be studied and dissected for generations. That summer and into the fall and in the ensuing years to come, amidst talk of Muslim bans, nasty women, border walls, and S-hole nations, it was common to hear in certain circles the disbelieving cries, "This is not America," or "I don't recognize my country," or "This is not who we are." Except that this was and is our country, and this was and is who we are, whether we have known or recognized it or not. The candidates were polar opposites, equally loathed by fans of their respective adversary. The extremes of that season forced Americans to take sides and declare their allegiances or find a way to dance around them. The campaign had become more than a political rivalry. It was an existential fight for primacy in a country whose demographics had been shifting beneath us. People whose ancestry traced back to Europe had been in the historic ruling majority, the dominant racial caste in an unspoken hierarchy before the founding of the Republic.
Good morning, All Souls. It is so good to be here with you today because there is no place I'd rather be than right here in Washington, D.C., coming to you live from the sanctuary of All Souls. And although you aren't here with me in the building, you are most definitely here in this church. I can see you in my mind's eye in these pews behind me, and more importantly, I can feel you. So do you remember where you were when you heard the news? I do, and it's a memory that will stay with me forever. I had just hopped off a city bike and was walking to church, and there was a man standing next to me on his cell phone. And people around us started honking their horns and shouting so he couldn't hear what his friend was saying. And he kept saying, "What? What just happened?" And then he turned to me with a big smile and he said, "We did it." And here we were, two strangers. We nearly started to hug each other, and then we remembered we shouldn't do that. And the street just erupted into this glorious cacophony of sound. Somebody was driving around the block playing Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive." And then I heard screaming coming from the church. And when I got here, it was the children. They were here for a choir rehearsal, and they were jumping up and down, and their parents were jumping up and down. And then I ran into Jen Heyman, and she said, "We should ring the bell." And we dashed up to the bell tower and rang that glorious Son of a Paul Revere bell, and it pealed with joy. It felt like freedom. It felt like a weight had been lifted off of our shoulders. You know, a part of me didn't want to preach a sermon today. I just wanted to simply rejoice with those of you who are celebrating this change in leadership. And I also wanted to give a shout out to all of you who have done so much, who have cared so deeply and worked so hard to sustain mind, body, heart, and soul throughout this election season. I know you're tired, and if the election had gone in another direction, many of us would be mourning and not celebrating. So earlier this week, I came across a beautiful pastoral letter that was written by my colleague, Reverend Anna Levy-Lyons of First Unitarian Church of Brooklyn, to her members, who wrote this as a way of acknowledging not only the emotional exhaustion of these past couple of weeks, but as a way to frame the end of this election season. And I think it may be helpful for us too. She writes, "Whatever you have done, know that from the standpoint of faith, you have done enough. If you helped get out the vote by volunteering or giving money, you have done enough. If you were part of the protests or activism of this era, you have done enough. If you cared for students, your colleagues, if you took care of your family, you have done enough. And if you were just barely able to keep your own body and soul together through the devastations of this time, you have done enough." So we need a moment to rest and reflect on what just happened, because honestly, I can't get away from this 4-year season fast enough. Can you? This season of COVID denying, science rejecting, money worshiping, immigrant hating, racist supporting, trash talking, self-centering, migraine inducing past 4 years. I'm done. Are you done? Like so many people that I've been reading on social media who write, "I want to be able to say this long national nightmare is finally over." Like many of you, I want to revel in these good feelings for as long as possible, because we also know that underneath this joy, there are some other truths, sobering truths. COVID is still with us and will be for some time. The 70 million people who voted for the current president are still here. Some of them are our neighbors, our friends, maybe some of our fellow members of All Souls too. And as they said in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. Now, I must confess, I wasn't a huge fan of Game of Thrones, but what I do know is that that is a metaphor for that which is coming. More storms are brewing, and we had better be prepared. So earlier this week, as the votes began to pour in, and it was not clear who the winner of this election was going to be, some of us vacillated between hope and despair. And as I said at Wednesday's vigil for Democracy and Hope, I wanted it all. I wanted the presidency, the Senate, the House, but more than that, I wanted the American people to resoundingly reject this administration's values, policies, and practices. The winter that is coming is the energy behind those 70 million people who embraced those values. And I want to acknowledge here, there are many reasons why people vote the way they do. And I also want to acknowledge these numbers didn't tell us anything new, and yet it revealed so plainly another level of trauma to an already traumatized, divided states of America. So much has been written about this. Why are we so divided? There have been many books and theories which attempt to understand these deep divisions in our country. And some assign the divisions solely to race, some to class, some say both. But Isabel Wilkerson's brilliant book, Caste: The Origins of Our Discontent, posit that our divisions are deeply rooted in an American caste system. Caste, she writes, is the infrastructure of our divisions. It is the architecture of our human hierarchy, the subconscious code of instructions for maintaining, in our case, a 400-year-old social order. Now, that is worthy of an entire sermon unto itself, and I plan to take up that theme in greater detail in January. But for today, I just want to share with you one piece from the book that sheds some light and explains the conditions that create this storm that is coming. We are well familiar with the white anxiety which elected our soon-to-be former president. We call it a white backlash, and Wilkerson acknowledges that as the country becomes less white, the desire to preserve whiteness in all of its manifestations is real. She recalls a conversation with civil rights historian Taylor Branch about democracy, how democracy will fare when it reaches a demographic watershed. The moment in 2040, when non-Hispanic whites are expected to see their majority disappear. So the real question would be, Branch says, if people were given the choice between democracy and whiteness, how many would choose whiteness? Is it really that stark? Is it really that terrifying? Yes, I think it is. Branch named what is right before our eyes. But the trauma of this nation did not solely rest on the shoulders of the president or Congress. Their dysfunction is only a symptom of the larger trauma from which this country has emerged and has never faced and will never heal unless it deals with its embedded caste system, the system that proscribes Black and brown lives to the lowest rung on the caste system. And until it gets to the root of its racist past, and as they say in Haiti, enact deshuke, which means to pull it up completely by its roots. And until this nation repents for its arrogant assumption known as American exceptionalism. It is no coincidence that the theme for this month is prophetic imagination, because the work that is needed most right now is prophetic imagination. The role of the prophets is to call out the status quo, that which we find acceptable or simply take for granted, and reveal its rottenness and say, this must not stand. But what the prophets also do is to imagine a world that reflects the values we believe are critical for our mutual survival. Not just red states, not just blue states, all of us. Ancient Hebrew prophets would wander around the streets of the wealthiest cities in the kingdom, weeping and wailing and pointing out the horrors of living in a society that does not value human life. And as I walked the streets of DC this week, I wondered what a Jeremiah or an Amos or an Ezekiel would say to what I saw. I saw men lying on the streets because they had no place else to lay their head, asking for change. And the only change I could give them was in my pocket. We've got room, we've got money, but we don't have the vision to do any better. America, we can do better. I saw the food in the little food pantry by the side of the church disappear within an hour. A mother with her child, a painfully skinny teenager, an elderly couple filling one plastic bag, careful to leave food for others. In a country with the greatest resources in the world, this elderly couple counts on us for their daily bread. America, we can do better. And as I walked around the city, I was hearing the voices of other more contemporary prophets too, like the environmental activist Greta Thunberg, who, like an ancient biblical prophet, railed at the world leaders last year when she told them this. She said, "This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back at school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and the fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? America, we can do better." And I hear the words of Reverend William Barber, co-leader of the Poor People's Campaign, in my mind's ear, who said, "We must shock this nation with the power of love. We must shock this nation with the power of mercy," he said. "We can't give up on the heart of our democracy. Not now, not ever. America, we can do better." These prophets, they spoke harshly, not out of rage alone. Their anger was also born of love, a deep, abiding love for the people, the nation, and the vision of what could be but was not yet. Just like the prophets, our rage and our power must be intertwined with love. Love for that which we cannot even yet imagine, but must. And as Vice President-elect Kamala Harris reminded us last night, she said, now the real work begins, the hard work, the necessary work, the good work, the essential work to save lives, beat this epidemic, and I would add, bring the shock of love to the heart of our democracy. 2 weeks ago, I offered you a poem by the poetic prophet Amanda Gorton. And I want to bring her back with an excerpt from one of her poems entitled, "We the People." And this poem speaks to the love and the passion and the hope and the prayers and the work that we have to do. Gorman writes this: "We the people are brave enough to love this country's creed. We the people love this country enough to question its misdeeds. We the people question enough to build upon this foundation. We the people erect an improved hilltop of a nation. Indivisible by where we come from or who we are born, we the people are those who let freedom ring, so that no matter how we love, talk, pray, or mourn, this America is ours to build and ours to sing. May it be so, and
Whew. Amen, Kathleen. I'm like wiping my eyes with like a toddler bed sheet because it was the only thing near me. Well, friends, we will do a very significant shout out to the Read Project in a future service, but we needed to do something today as well. Now, as just a little context for those who may not be familiar or who have forgotten, All Souls Read Project for Voting Rights was founded in 2014, in part at the invitation of William Barber to partner on work in North Carolina, and in part after the US Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. It's named in honor of Reverend James Reeb, a former minister of All Souls, who was murdered in March 1965 while working for voting rights in Selma. We'll share our specific numbers later, but This year, hundreds of Read Project volunteers joined with Unitarian Universalists from all around the country in the first ever nationwide You the Vote campaign. The campaign's original goal was to reach 1 million voters. In the end, it's looking like the campaign will have reached more than 3 million voters. And the Read Project, through our partnership with Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice, led by All Souls member Pablo de Jesus, played a very significant role in this nationwide effort by hosting literally dozens of text banks, phone banks, and postcard drives to voters in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Virginia, and our own Washington, D.C. Our voting campaign organizer, Kelsey Calger, helped us get rolling in the summer, took a break in September to have a baby, and then helped us finish the year strong, including by coordinating the nationwide You the Vote action on Election Day itself. Lay leaders Maddie Feeder, Pam Kukos, Ann Maxwell, and so many others did hours upon hours of research, planning, organizing, and last but certainly not least, data management, because your organizing is only as good as your data. So in the chat right now, and or with the reactions feature on Zoom, I invite you to show your appreciation for all these leaders and for everyone at All Souls and throughout the country who participated in the Read Project this year. Show some love, show some love. Now, we also know that the work isn't over. There hasn't been a concession. The election isn't certified. White supremacy is still very much entrenched, and the Georgia runoff has widespread implications for the nation. So I want you to both celebrate and stay tuned for future Read Project actions. Thanks.
Lift every voice and sing.
Lift every voice and sing to heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of
Lift every
liberty.
voice and sing a song.
Rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
Voice and sing.
Sing a
Lift
song.
every voice and
When Joe Biden was projected president at 11:24 a.m. yesterday, my 10-year-old son ran to where I was anchored in the 5-day cushion dent that had become my new home in front of a TV mercilessly broadcasting cable news and cried, "Is it true?" It was. A new president had been declared at last. Jubilation commenced, and my 5-year-old daughter joined us, chanting, "Our team won! Go blue! Go blue!" After a month-plus fog of cable news hypnotization, I emerged blinking into the sunlight, feeling as if I had simultaneously shed a weighted blanket, my bra, and 2 tight hair braids. I could breathe again. We put on our spiffiest Biden-Harris and RBG t-shirts, hopped in the Mini Cooper with the top down, and joined the joyful honking parade down to Black Lives Matter Plaza. Though slightly nervous about joining a crowd, I wanted my kids to remember forever the day that democracy won. And we danced in the streets. Though every single person we saw wore a mask, universal elation radiated through their eyes and their whoops. No victory happens without foot soldiers, and I reflected on the many heroes of the 2020 election. First, of course, must be my new emotional support animal, Steve Kornacki at MSNBC, the Clark Kent of the map board. My anxiety doubled in those rare moments when they let Twitter's new boyfriend off screen for a moment. A not insignificant shout out must go to the employee at Four Seasons Total Landscaping who answered the call from the White House and booked them. Watching that, I thought, 1, my job is at risk because I could write fiction my whole life and still never think of anything funnier. And 2, it should be illegal to be this happy. Most of all, my mind turned to Stacey Abrams, a woman people said was not qualified to become governor of Georgia, despite having multiple degrees and political experience. A woman people called selfish for not wanting to run for Senate after losing the governor's race runoff. Instead, Stacey started her own organization, Fair Fight, to fix what she saw as the gross voter suppression that cost her her election. Some called her a sore loser, but 2 years later, we watched her work unfold in real time as the 800,000 plus new voters that she registered helped hand Joe Biden the presidency, could flip the Senate, and permanently shifted the entrenched way of thinking about whole swaths of states. Stacey Abrams showed the power of an individual foot soldier doing quiet work behind the scenes, getting out the vote one by one, and clearing the path for the first female Black vice president, though the path had not been cleared for her yet. 4 years ago, I came to church in an abjectly different mood, frightened, confused, grieving, lost. And I don't know what I would have done had I not found our sanctuary. It was seeing so many of us together, despite open weeping and sorrow, that gave me hope in 2016. I was not in this alone. And after only brief mourning, this congregation mobilized through the Read Voting Rights Project and many other initiatives. I give generously to All Souls because it is one more tireless foot soldier, relentlessly pressing the arc of the moral universe forward towards justice. And I ask that you do too. On the screen and in the chat, you'll find a link to give in real time today. Please join me for today's digital offering and consider making a special gift to celebrate this special day and all the heroes who made it possible. Thank you.
We end this service with these words of benediction: with faith in the creative powers of life, with hope for the future of life in this world, with love for all others who share this life with us, let us go forward together in peace. Our meeting has ended. Let our service now begin. Go in peace.